AI is about to kill so many of our jobs. Lawyers, bankers, customer service reps, market research, copy editors, graphic designers, manufacturing line workers, retail checkout workers, financial advisors, coders, web developers, journalists, historians, bookkeepers, you name it. The AI language models can do it all. So us humans will be left in the dust. Or will we? Actually, simple economic analysis would suggest otherwise. In fact, pretty close to the exact opposite of what everyone is worried about. Hi, I'm Nadav, and I'm a professor at INSEAD, which is a top business school in Europe and Asia, also with a pretty good track record in America. And today, I'll explain why the conventional wisdom about AI and jobs is almost certainly wrong. So let's start. The best way to understand what's about to happen is with examples first. So let's start with those, and then I'll outline the logic behind them. So, first example, in the 1980s, when CAT scans got appreciably cheaper thanks to technological advances, the fear was that all the people employed in radiology, even the doctors, even the radiologists, would lose their jobs. But according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment in this sector didn't fall. It actually grew about 30% over a decade. What happened was that when the cost of CT scans went down, more people could afford them, and so they did them. So doctors were more likely to recommend them, and insurance companies were more willing to pay for them. So generally, there were just more scans out there. And if there were more scans, that meant more need for human oversight, complex cases, and new specialties like interventional radiology, which didn't exist before. So the efficiency that came from the technological advancement created jobs rather than killed them. Here's another example, transportation. Ride-sharing apps like Uber basically commodified mobility, and it dropped the cost of a ride from a taxi fare, which used to be very expensive, to basically pocket change. So you would expect fewer drivers overall, but in fact, because labor costs went down in the driving industry, that exploded demand. People who walked or took buses or took trains now would just hail rides. People who would buy a car would say, I don't need a car, I can just use Uber. So there were new uses as well, like food delivery. So global ride-hailing drivers ballooned from a few thousands to millions. Yes, that meant that some taxicab drivers turned into Uber drivers, but a 2023 McKinsey report showed that employment in this sector was up 4x since 2015. We can go very far back in history to the Industrial Revolution to see the same pattern. Until the 1870s, prior to the invention of something called the Bessemer process, buildings were limited by materials like wood, brick, and iron, which could not support extreme heights or withstand stresses of building tall. Basically, there were no skyscrapers or really tall buildings. The inventions of cheap ways to make steel changed all that, and so now we have skyscrapers everywhere. We don't even see them as something special. At the time, the fear was extreme displacement in traditional iron-working trades. People who made iron were worried they would lose their jobs. And these fears manifested in strikes, in union resistance, and in shutdown of plants. Big problems in the 1870s to the 1890s. However, because steel was so cheaper now, the result was increased demand for construction labor, and so more people were employed, not less. Steel production itself did indeed reduce the need for people who worked in iron, but those people just adjusted their trade to work with steel. And there were new professions now that there are so many buildings and such tall buildings can be constructed. Now there were jobs in handling mass-produced steel beams, for example, or operating machinery related to steel that didn't exist before. Overall, employment in the construction sector increased, not decreased. So now let's get to the theory. What is the logic behind all this? Isn't it the case that a new technology displaces the current workers in the old technology because the old technology is obsolete? Didn't the invention of the car make the people who drove horse and buggy obsolete? This is not a new problem. Our intuitions about this are partially right, but our intuitions also don't think ahead. So let's analyze what happens when a new technology is invented. The first step is, yes, it reduces the cost of something. And so it makes all the substitutes for that something basically obsolete. So if a car is cheap enough, nobody is going to want to buy a horse or a carriage. This will reduce the supply of horses and carriages. But here's the second step, and it's far less intuitive, but far bigger in magnitude than the first step. If a car is cheap enough, then many people will buy it compared to if it's expensive. In other words, the demand for cars will skyrocket and more than offset the decline in demand for horses and carriages. So now we can build more cars, but also we can build roads, we can build tires, we can build engines, doors, trunks. We can build accessories to cars like suitcases that fit into cars or car seats or cool different colors or paints for new cars. We have a whole new sector of people who drive cars that didn't exist before. And most importantly, millions of people will be able to use cars, creating much more jobs and reducing the cost of transportation for the entire economy, making us all wealthier. Yes, some of us who are riding horses for a living will have to adjust. It's not an easy adjustment at all, to be sure. But those people will likely have a place in the new car economy. Now, this idea is not mine. It was first articulated back in 1865 by an economist named William Stanley Jevons. And he noticed something very interesting about coal in England at the time. So what happened then is new steam engines, engines that use steam, were the new technology. And they made coal much more efficient. So you would think that that would reduce the amount of coal that was needed, because if coal is more efficient, you need less coal to travel the same distance. Now that indeed was the first step, but not quite the full story. That was actually wrong, because the efficiency of coal made travel or any kind of thing you do with coal much cheaper. And so many more industries adopted coal for everything. They had more factories, ships, or even heating for your home. The demand for coal skyrocketed and coal consumption exploded, and so did jobs in coal. And that's called now the Jevons paradox, after this economist who figured out that a big technology, yes, creates adjustments for people who worked in the old technology, but also increases demand in ways that offsets the losses from the old technology. Okay, so enough with history. Let's apply this to AI in the current period. AI agents make non-routine tasks, so tasks that require creativity, like coding, or like drafting a report, or like brainstorming campaigns. AI agents make these tasks super cheap and accessible. So if you're a small startup, before AI, if you had to build custom software for some specialized goal that you had and nobody else had, that might have cost you $100,000 and months or years of work. Now an AI agent can prototype such a customized software in days for far less money. And so the result is that startups can tackle 10x or 100x the number of projects that they did. They could develop apps that they wouldn't have developed, and they could develop features in their products that they only dreamed of before AI. That means that, listen carefully, that means that the demand for coders doesn't actually drop. It actually rises, because there's much more coding that's going to be done because of AI. Because customized software is going to be used everywhere, as opposed to only for companies that could afford it. So now coders might do different things. They wouldn't just code, but instead they would provide testing of the code that the AI did. They would provide oversight. They would provide ideation and integration and advanced tweaking of the code. And so there will be not fewer coders, but more coders who do slightly different things with the AI. Another example, pre-AI, you had to pay a ton of money to lawyers to deliver the most basic legal documents, like a contract. Now with AI, there will be an explosion of legal work done because it's cheaper. There might even be more lawsuits out there. Not that we need more lawsuits, but there might be, because the cost of legal work would go down, at least some legal work. Lawyers will have to adjust to being advisors rather than executors of legal documents, but there will be so much more legal work around them that they should be able to benefit if they adjust. Another example, pre-AI, buying a company or merging a company was expensive because, among other things, you had to hire expensive bankers to shepherd the deal through. Now, bankers will act as advisors, but not so much as writers of contracts or covenants, because the AI will help with that. There will be many more deals happening because the cost of a deal will go down, and so there will be much more work for bankers who focus on making deals happen. Pre-AI, graphic design took a lot of work, a lot of time, and it was very costly. Now, startups or even individuals can create ad copy very easily. So there will be much more graphic design work out there, and graphic designers will have to shift their work by using AI to create many more ads in shorter time frames. But the need for good taste and good connection to the customer, to the brand, to the audience will still remain. And so the jobs of graphic designers will change, but there will be much more graphic design work out there that overall graphic designers should benefit. Overall, based on the history and the logic, I believe we should squash the conventional wisdom that AI will take our jobs. Yes, it will take away some jobs and transform others, but it will also increase demand for things that were very expensive but now become affordable. It would create jobs that didn't exist before, just like the invention of the car created the job of the car driver. Now, don't get me wrong, transitioning is hard for all of us. There's uncertainty and there's a sense that the world is moving so fast and we're just trying to keep up. My job as a professor will adjust, will change. I will have to change how I teach my students. And there's a sense that a few people are making bank over this AI technology while all the rest of us are left without that much money but having to adjust to the new technology. All of this is true, and this is a painful process. But I promise you, at the end of it, there will be more rather than less wealth for most, if not all of us. And there will be not a small amount of learning and personal growth for all of us too. So how do you win? Couple of tips here. First, my strong recommendation is whatever you think of AI, adopt this phrase. If you can't beat them, join them. So embrace AI as a multiplier. Use it for drafts of your work or ideation, and then add your human edge to your work. Whatever job you're doing, make it better and faster with AI. Second, you want to upskill, get better at oversight for AI, supervising what the AI does. Learn to manage AI agents. Take courses on how to engineer prompts for AI to get the work that you want done. Do that and specialize it for your own industry and job. Third, you have to spot opportunities in your field. Ask, what will be unlocked if this task gets 10x cheaper? You got to capture those opportunities either in your current job or through being an entrepreneur. Fourth, if you're leading a team, you definitely want to normalize AI in the workflows of your employees. Get ideas from your employees about how to better use AI, and then use AI as a tool to improve the performance of the team, and then also, by extension, your performance as a leader. Now, pro tip, you can also simply ask AI. You can go to Grok or go to Claude or whatever service you're using, and ask the AI, describe the job that you're doing, describe the industry, describe your team, and ask it, how can I use you, AI agent, to benefit, to improve the work that we're doing? You'll be surprised at the responses and how useful they are. Okay, so if this shifted your AI fears just a little bit, or maybe even a lot, changed fear to excitement, or at least gave you a sense of some control over this situation, then like and subscribe and comment. What's one task that the AI could do really, really well in your job to make it a lot better? Thanks for watching, and let's build the future together with AI rather than against it.